So the UN 2030 agenda calls for a new form of science and for a new form of education to be able to tackle all the sustainability challenges which we are facing in the world and to somehow contribute to sustainability transformation. So it has been agreed that business as usual is no longer an option. Things have to change, we have to innovate. So the question is, what type of research is required? And also what kind of education is required? Just want to check, can you hear me clearly? Yeah, okay, perfect. So let's have a look at the long list. What are the requirements for research and also for education to be able to support sustainable development? So on the left side, you have a list of demands for sustainable development. So we need to be able to understand the complex society environment interrelations that can be climate change, globalization, growing social economic disparities, etc. So the answer from science or education is we have to work in interdisciplinary context. So we have to go beyond our discipline to be able to understand these complex situations. Then another step is we have to be able to manage these complex society environment interrelations, the so-called wicked problems. And often there is incomplete knowledge, we don't know everything, and there are high dynamics. So for this, the answer from science is transdisciplinary cooperation, meaning we are moving out of the academia, we are reaching out to practitioners on the ground, to government staff, etc. And so through this transdisciplinary cooperation, we are able to manage this complex society environment interrelation. And then obviously we have multiple interactions at all levels. It goes from local, national, regional to global. So to be able to tackle those issues, multi-level stakeholder approaches are key. And then to be able to tackle these phases of acceleration and high dynamism, we really need a new way of thinking. We need flexible research approaches and methods. We need to be innovative and creative. So it's quite a complex list of demands. How can we answer or foster sustainable development? And at the very bottom, you can see we have education that supports sustainable development. And this is the focus of today specifically. So what for innovative teaching, learning, and arrangements can be built that foster knowledge, skills, and attitudes and value development of the students. So I will not really go into depth on sustainable development, as I know you have other sessions about it, but it's seen as a vision and a guiding idea for society as a whole. And this requires action and implementation at different levels. So it's been starting, you can see it on the figure, at the individual level, things have to happen, but then collectively at the local level, and then obviously it goes beyond from the local level to the national, regional, and international level as well. So let me come to the UN 2030 agenda, and there today we are particularly interested in the goal number 4, which I'm sure you are very well aware about it. It's the goal on quality education. So in the UN 2030 agenda, education got a standalone goal, and the aim here is to ensure inclusive and quality education for all, and also to promote lifelong learning. But the education is also included in other targets like health, growth and employment, sustainable consumption. So it's also, as it's cross-cutting, it's also included in other targets, and education can accelerate the progress towards the achievement of all the SDGs. So let's have a closer look at what is education for sustainable development. So in goal 4, there is the specific target 4.4, which calls or states by 2030, it ensures that all learners acquire the knowledge, skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development. So what is the definition of education for sustainable development? It's the totality of all actions by which people seek to promote the competencies of learners in such a way as to enable them to shape sustainable development. And in this session, we will have a closer look, what do we mean by competencies of learners? So education for sustainable development encompasses holistic, inter and transdisciplinary learning methods. It tries to sensitize people and enable them to shape future development in a responsible way. And it makes innovative contribution to economic, social, ecological, and cultural topics. And it tries to make a positive contribution to society. And you might be familiar, so the UNESCO, they developed Education for Sustainable Development Framework for 2030. Previously, they had a global action program, which ended in 2019. And from 2020 onwards, they have this 10-year initiative on ESD for 2030. So their vision is that ESD for 2030 aims to build a more just and sustainable world through strengthening ESD and contributing to the achievement of all 17 SDGs. And they have priority action areas. So one is transforming learning environments, so meaning the learning environment at the higher education institutions. I think that's the focus of our session today. We're not focusing on secondary or primary level learning environments, but to somehow transform this institution, then to build capacities of the educators that they are fit to somehow link to these competencies needed, but also empowering and mobilizing youth and accelerating local level actions. And in this UNESCO roadmap, they highlight 5 key areas. So the first one is more advancing policy. So this is more at the policy level that ESD is integrated. Then the second one is looking at learning environments, promoting whole institutional approaches. And I think we will cover or focus more on the second one and the third one today in this session. The third one is educators, so providing capacity development opportunities to educators that they are capable and fit to integrating the ESD approaches in their teaching. Then the fourth one is related to youth, providing opportunities for youth engagement. And the fifth is related to community. So it's key to empower local communities as nodal platforms for all priority action areas. So this is just to give you the global picture of the UNESCO framework. And in May 2021, UNESCO had a conference, and from this conference issued the Berlin Declaration on Education for Sustainable Development. And down there you can read a statement which comes from this declaration. I will read it to you. So we are confident that education is a powerful enabler of positive change of mindsets and worldviews, and that it can support the integration of all dimensions of sustainable development. Here we are referring to economy, society, and the environment, ensuring that development trajectories are not exclusively oriented towards economic growth to the detriment of the planet, but towards the well-being of all within planetary boundaries. I think that's kind of the key, right? That it's the well-being within all planetary boundaries. And this UN Declaration on Education for Sustainable Development has some key points in the preamble, which I think is interesting if we have a look at them together. So ESD enables learners to develop their cognitive, kind of the head, the thinking part, but also the non-cognitive skills, such as critical thinking and competencies for collaboration, problem solving, coping with complexity and risks, building resilience, thinking systematically and creatively. And here already the thought, how are you as lecturers able to trigger all these different competencies? So ESD empowers learners to take responsible actions as citizens, fulfilling their right to quality education as defined in SDG Goal 4. And ESD must be based on and promote respect for nature, as well as human rights, democracy, the rule of law, non-discrimination, equity, and gender equality. And ESD should promote intercultural understanding, cultural diversity, a culture of peace and non-violence, inclusion, and the notion of responsible and active global citizenship. And also a key component in this ESD declaration are the dimensions of learning. And they can be summarized as head, heart, and hand. So the head is more the brain, this cognitive learning, where you get all the knowledge to be able to understand sustainability challenges and their complex interlinkages and explore alternative solutions. But then it's also important that we don't forget the heart. Kind of all of us, we have our core values, our attitudes. So it's important to build them also towards sustainability, cultivate empathy and compassion for other people and the planet, and also that there is motivation to lead to change or to transformation. And the third one is the hand, practical action. So in a way, it's important that students in university settings, they don't only learn, let's say, theory, but that they are also able to gain practical skills to be able to then implement them on the ground. So these are the 3 dimensions of learning. So with having heard all of this, the question is now for you or for us, how can we capacitate the young generation to become future change agents? So as I learned, you're all lecturers, I think at higher education institutions, I guess, and the students you're having, once they have their degree, they will go out into professional life and they take different positions. It might be in research, they might become teacher themselves, they might go into politics, they might have a work related to civil society or economy administration. So it's very diverse. So in a way, we have to ask ourselves, what will be the and what typical situations will they have to master in their future jobs? And what for competencies do they need to master these situations and to foster sustainable development? So here we are linking it to the UN 2030 agenda, and we are linking the question also to the dimensions of learning. So I guess you've already must have heard about the sustainability competencies. And in literature, there are quite a lot of different concepts. Also, the UNESCO has their competencies list. So the person Rickman had a look at all of these different framework and concepts and came up with a distilled list, which is summarizing the key competencies which are needed for learners to become sustainability citizens, if we can use that term. So I will walk you through those different competencies. So the first one is systems thinking competency. So the student or learners should be able to recognize and understand relationships, to analyze complex systems, and to perceive the ways in which systems are embedded within different domains and at different scales, and also to deal with uncertainty. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges we are having, right? There is a lot of uncertainty in all of it. Then another competency is anticipatory action, the ability to understand and evaluate multiple futures, possible, probable, and desirable futures, and to also create own visions for the future. Then the next competency is normative competency. So to have the ability to understand and reflect on the norms and values that underlie one's action, and to negotiate sustainability values, the ability to collectively develop and implement innovative actions that further sustainability at the local level. And let me move to the next slide. Then Rickman summarizes 4 other group of competencies. So the collaboration competency, the ability to learn from others, understand and respect the needs, perspective, and actions of others, also showing empathy. Then we have critical thinking competency, also the ability to question norms, to question practices and opinions, reflect to one's own values, perceptions, and action, and take a position in the sustainability discourse. Then we also have the self-awareness competency, the ability to reflect on one's own role in the local community or in the global society, and continually evaluate and further motivate one's action and deal with one's feeling and desires. And last but not least, to integrate it, to have integrated problem-solving competency. So to have the ability to apply different problem-solving frameworks to complex sustainability problems and to develop viable solutions. So here we have those sustainability competencies in front of us, and maybe some of them sound a little bit abstract, but I think with the text to it, we are able to grasp them. And the question brings us now, how can we organize effective teaching learning arrangements which somehow build some of the required competencies needed for sustainable development? Obviously, we cannot tackle everything in one go, but in higher education programs, it's important to somehow have these different competencies in view when you are organizing your classes or the modules or your study programs. And so education for sustainable development should lead to the development of competencies for action. And so education and training concepts at higher education institutions should be based on this concept that at the end of the study program, you want that your students were able to collect or to develop a certain set of competencies. And often these competencies, they are linked to the academic knowledge, but then they are also linked to professional skills and critical awareness. And maybe just to illustrate, so academic knowledge, we refer to all the theories, methods, which are out there, concepts, but then it's important that the students also have some maybe practical sessions, depending on the study field. It can be they have exercises in the lab, or they go out into the city if they analyze specific, let's say, water systems. So that it's not only theory based, that it's somehow a mix of sessions which enable them to build a broad set of competencies. So in a way, we have a change of perspective. So teacher, they reflect what the students must be able to do in the end. So there you reflect at the end of the program or the course, what do students need to know more on the academic knowledge level, but also what do they need to be able to do. Maybe they need to be able to organize a whole study on a certain topic. So they are able to organize this, to reach out to different actors, to involve them, etc. But then also what should be their attitude and values. And I think a key point that is that relevant knowledge has to be learned in prototypical situations. So in active situations, which can be remembered later as an anchor for the associated knowledge. So it can be a field exercise or a specific lab exercise, so that it's somehow linked to active action. And here summarized are key pedagogical approaches in ESD. And I'm sure you're familiar with them. So we have a learner-centered approach, we have an action-oriented learning, and we have a transformative learning approach. And a learner-centered approach, we mean active development of knowledge rather than transfer of passive learning. So students are somehow active in a situation or in an exercise. And you as educators, you are the facilitators of the learning process. In the action-oriented learning, the learners are engaged in action and reflect on their experiences. And so there you as educators, you create a learning environment that promotes this reflective process. And then we have also the transformative learning. Here, this empowers the learners to question and change their ways of seeing or thinking about the world. So here you are also the facilitator who challenges maybe the learners in their views. And here just some examples of teaching learning arrangements which are creating spaces for transformative moments to arise. So key is to work on a real world context with complex problem settings which are solution oriented. Maybe you have a problem in your city, and depending on your discipline, you can organize a case study where the students go out into the city. For example, it can be the waste problem the city might be having. And so if you expose them to real world context, it might be more inspiring for them. But also to bring them together with students from other disciplines. This would be then the interdisciplinary aspects, that students not only stay, let's say, in their own discipline, but are able to learn with other disciplines and also get exposed to other topics, because often in the sustainability context, one discipline alone cannot find the answer. Then also important to enable students to take a more active role. So here we have the student-centered approach. And also interesting to allow students to interact with actors from practice. So enable experiential learning outside of the classroom, including learning through action. And also to focus on jointly developed solutions and motivate for working towards sustainable development, also allows for emotional engagement. And in the learning, we say that there are like different learning zones. So all of us, we are in our comfort zone where we feel comfortable and safe. And the theory says that there has to be a learning, or there is a learning zone. So you have to be put a little bit outside of your comfort zone to be able to be in a good learning environment. But we have to avoid the panic zone. So if a learner, that's not a good zone to be in. So as lecturers, we have to learn also to navigate those different zones. And there is another theory, and I've heard you already discussed about transformative learning, I think also. It's showing a little bit the same like the previous slide, but a little bit differently. So the comfort zone is here, the state 1, where you have maybe your current or old meaning and perspective and beliefs. And there might be a trigger. It can be in studies, but it can also be in personal life or situations which are happening. And then this triggers maybe also related to climate change and all the negative, messages we get. Sometimes probably we need to avoid that students, they really block and get into panic zone. So we have to find ways where the comfortable or the learning zone becomes active. And in this figure, maybe the learner then gets to a new state B, or maybe they stay where they are. So that's then, that depends on the situations. And on another similar aspect are summarized at there are different orders of learning. Here, it's adapted from Sterling et al. They are speaking of 3 different orders of learning. So the first order of learning, you are is conformative, addressing the cognitive dimension. And at this level, the student is learning new things, but they are not really questioning their values and beliefs. And in the second order of learning, it's called reformative. And here, it's already related to the affective dimensions and emotions. And here it's already linking to critically questioning and then adapting beliefs, values, and assumptions which students are having. And the third order is then here we come to the transformative learning. Here we go to a paradigm shift where students are seeing things differently. But I guess that's then quite a tricky one or difficult to get there. That's then really a deeper